Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Vincent's webinar on aged care. My name is Mark Allara, so I'm the Director here at Vincent's in Financial Advisory. In today's session, we're going to be focusing on understanding the financial options for aged care. There's no doubt that our exposure to aged care is not a matter of will it affect me, but probably more highly likely a matter of when it'll affect me or my family. At that time, it's a time of high emotions and financial decision making. It's obviously a very stressful time for families. But this is where we believe early planning and sound advice can achieve both not only an optimum outcome for the family, but also minimise the stress and pressures put on those family members. So to explain the various options for aged care, I welcome this afternoon Mr. David Codey from Morgans Financial. So as you may be aware, Vincents has a strong relationship with Morgans via our management of the Mount Gravatt office of Morgans. David is a consulting advisor for Morgans and provides a specialist service in this aged care space. So David was responsible for setting up the aged care service for Morgans and not only provides advice to their clients, but is also engaged to provide advice to the public trustee clients. We welcome questions. But what we might do is, with the questions, in the interest of time, we'll actually contact you. If you leave your contact details and your questions, we'll come back to you on a one-on-one and address any questions that you may have. So without further delay, I'll let David walk through his presentation.
Thanks, Mark. Well, you've stolen all my thunder in terms of talking about where aged care fits in the scheme of the financial planning universe. But for those that have actually had any personal experience with a loved one or a family member or even a friend, they realise that the path through the aged care maze is not straightforward. Fee structure is complex and it's sometimes difficult to know the best way to cover costs. So as Mark said, it's all about getting as much information to get as you can, planning ahead, and in a lot of instances seeking advice to ensure that the right decisions end up getting made. I'm just clicking on to the next slide. I'm not going to talk about Morgans to say. I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that we have over 500 advisors in our network across Australia. Mark's already mentioned about the relationship we have with himself and Vincents. But so that's that second bullet point there. So we've over 500 advisors. The last bullet point though is our aged care advice service is delivered by a specialist team out of Brisbane, which I set up and I've run for a number of years. The reason I draw your attention to that is because of our 500 advisors, there's about 5 that we, from a compliance and knowledge point of view, would be comfortable in giving aged care advice. So financial advisors can have the appropriate accreditations, etc., but if they don't have specific knowledge and experience in the aged care space, it can be very challenging. So I just draw your attention to that particular point, and most financial advice groups will be the same around Australia. General disclaimer, this is obviously just general information, not personal advice. That's a pretty standard one we've got to drop in there. Okay, now I'm not going to regale you with all the statistics of the ageing population. I think every time we pick up any sort of publication these days or any news story, everyone's talking about the ageing population, the baby boomer cohort coming through and what they're going to demand, and everything from retirement living to aged care facilities. It's just a couple of things, a couple of stats I wouldn't mind sharing with you because I find them particularly interesting. First one is that these figures show that once you get to age 65, the chance of needing aged care for a woman is 68% and for men 48%. Now again, we can't make sexist comments here, but obviously women are going out in front. The reason being men have a lower life expectancy than women. So, which again, the problem with that is it leaves a number of women living alone and potentially vulnerable in that situation. And I should just point out 44% of people over age 65 live alone. But the one that I really want to draw your attention to is that about the informal caring arrangements. In the past, when we've had big families living close by, they provided care for the aged in their family. So that's about 80% situations that applies in now with what we call informal carers, which will be children, relatives or friends, and that's all happening in the home. But with smaller families, children living away, etc., that is going to change. So there's going to be fewer informal carers around to provide the role that is provided, as I say now, in about 80% of cases. The other stat there just on the bottom of that page is that the number of people aged over 85 is going to increase at about 35,000 per annum in Australia going forward. Now that's a serious number, and if you just bring that back to a Queensland context, which is about 20% of that growth, when you hear the talk about how many facilities are being built or not being built, you can understand the numbers and how they're going to impact across broad sections of our community. Now, in terms of aged care, it's not all about residential aged care. So that's at the top of this triangle there. We just get down to the bottom. The vast majority of Australians want to live independently, want to stay in their home. There's only 25% of people that will actually access residential services, i.e. a residential aged care facility used to be called a nursing home. So the other 75% are going to access various programs that are available now. And these include what is called the Commonwealth Home Support Program. Again, there's a lot of acronyms in this space. I'll try and keep it to a minimum, but it used to be called the Home and Community Care Package Program. This is about when someone's living in their own home, they just want to access some services. And these will be services that are provided by providers out there that don't have to necessarily fit into the aged care system. I'll talk more about that shortly. From there, you go to what we call home care packages. And this is where the government subsidisation really kicks in. You have to get assessed for one of these packages, but there's 4 levels of care available in your home, and you get assessed about what level would be appropriate. These packages are really for people that want to remain in their home and have an existing support from either a spouse or from family members and sometimes friends. But to get access to these services, you've got to get what they call ACAT assess, and ACAT just simply stands for an Aged Care Assessment Team. They have to come and they do an independent assessment of your needs. And on that basis, you're allocated in one of these levels of care. The other one I put there is respite care. This is available for elderly people who tend to need a temporary residential care solution. So they'll go into a residential care facility, usually to give their informal carer a break. And under the regulations, you're allowed a certain amount of times you can go into respite care without it impacting or costing, which we'll talk more about shortly. Retirement villages are obviously people choose to live in retirement villages. They're not going to stay in their own home. Everyone should understand the difference between a retirement village and a residential care facility. They're not one and the same at all. Retirement villages are basically run by private enterprise operations and sometimes community organisations, but they don't have any government subsidy attached. What is happening in the last 6 to 12 months especially is that a number of the big retirement village operators are starting to try and work out how they're going to bring residential care services to some of their clients who are living in their retirement villages. So you're starting to see some of the development where they're going to actually have a retirement village co-located with a residential care facility. And I think more and more of that will happen as time goes on. But I just want to stress, retirement villages are not subsidised by the government at all. So at the top of the slide, we've got residential care. So these are facilities for people that no longer can live independently. I think we'd all appreciate that. In the old days, and that was only 18 months ago, there used to be a distinction between low care and high care residents. There's no longer. Everyone is treated as the same. It just comes down to the level of care they need in the facility. So we're going to focus on residential care today, at the top of that pyramid there. But because it's the most complex area and where the greatest costs are associated. But in saying that, the next slide, I just want to give you a sense of the costs around if you were to stay in your home and get a home care package. Full pensioners, so if you're a full pensioner, you'll pay a fee set at 7.5% of your basic single age pension, and that'll obviously kick up as the pension rate changes. So that's in the order of $3,500, just under $3,600 that you would pay. If you're a part pension or self-funded and above certain income levels, you'll pay that basic fee, but you'll also pay an income-tested fee. Now, that's capped at $5,000 and $10,000 depending on how much income you get, but that gives you access to a range of home care services, which are heavily subsidised by the government. Now, in terms of accessing subsidised care, whether it be for home or for residential care, I keep mentioning this ACAT assessment. You've got to get an assessment to either get home care packages or to move into residential care. Otherwise, you won't be accepted by the residential care provider. The service you go into, and they call them residential services now. Nursing homes, that term's not used anymore. Aged care facilities, that was used sort of 12 or 18 months ago. Now it's more residential care services. So you'll hear all those things. They all mean the same thing. But there's just all different terminologies used. It needs to be an accredited service, accredited by the federal government. Otherwise, they won't get the subsidy, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work for you. So you add those two together, and you get subsidised care in a residential care facility. Now, in terms of choosing the right service, this is like a little circle here, a little continuum. Initially, when people look at residential care, they look at the cost, because the costs are now far more transparent than they used to be. They're quoted on residential services websites. They're quoted on a government website called myagecare.gov.au, which is a site that you should certainly have a look at if you have interest in this area. A lot of information, but as with a lot of government sites, without being critical, there's almost too much information. It doesn't really drill down to specific needs of a client, because obviously it can't. So the big issue is here, you've got to find the service, you've got to find what's available, where you want to be, and the various amenities that might be available with that. You've got to look at what the cost of that. I'm going to go through in more detail shortly about what your accommodation cost is going to be. You've got to make decisions about, look, is it affordable? Is that value for money? And that's not just a sort of a financial or quantitative assessment, it's a qualitative assessment as well. And then the big one is obviously where me and my team get heavily involved is how you structure your assets to pay for that. And again, we'll do a case study shortly which will take you through that. So in my experience, there's always variations on this circle. Like, you don't just start at one and go to 2, 3, 4 and it's done. You'll revisit things, look at different options, and I'll give you some example of how that works shortly. To give you a sense of residential care and how much the government subsidises, the minimum cost of going into a care facility in terms of what they call the basic care fee is just over $17,000 a year. But the maximum that can be charged by a facility can be over $93,000 and even higher to have you some really specific high care needs. The government subsidises a large part of this cost, and that's why it's so heavily regulated and why they've been bringing in changes over the last few years to make sure that things are done appropriately for all concerned. But that's just to give you a sense of the costs involved. Okay, so what will you pay if you want to, you or a family member needs to go into an aged care facility? So there's an accommodation payment. Now these, as I said, in the, I won't say the bad old days, but going back over 18 months ago, if you were to ring up a facility and say, look, my mother needs to go into a facility, how much is the bond? The response would be, what assets does your mother have? So it was very much about, a price was calculated based on the assets that an incoming resident or potential incoming resident would have. Now, I'm not saying there was anything untoward about that, but it lacked transparency, it lacked real clarity for people. So the big changes that came through on the 1st of July last year, 2014, were that every aged care provider has to put up their fees on their website, their own website, and also if you go to the government website, My Aged Care, you can look at the fees there. So they're there in black and white. There's all different room types. There'll be rooms with en suites or not en suites. There'll be shared rooms, whatever it might be, but it's all listed there. My experience, depending on the demand supply situation in particular geographies, you can sometimes negotiate a rate lower than that's on the website in some situations. but the facility cannot charge more than they've advertised. So if they've advertised a room cost as, for example, $350,000, they can't suddenly turn around and charge you more than that. Now, once you choose the place, the accommodation payment, you can either pay that as a lump sum or on a daily basis. I'm going to go through that in more detail shortly. So that's your accommodation payment. You then pay a basic daily care fee, and that is basically at the moment $17,334 a year, and that covers all your basic stay in that facility. There's then a means tested fee. Now the reason behind the means tested fee, if people have the means to assist to cover some of that subsidisation cost that the federal government's paying, they should. So again, from my point of view, I think it's fair because it doesn't. It's not a negative for people that may have lower means, and there's a lot of situations where I deal with some clients who've got lower means. They can still be accommodated, and it doesn't cost them the full amount because the government subsidises that even more. But in saying that, there's a means tested fee. It's based on income and assets. I won't go through the calculations here. It's quite convoluted. But in saying that, there's an annual cap of $25,000. Obviously per year on that, and then there's a lifetime cap of $61,000. They get indexed up over time. So if you look at it from that point of view, if you had limitless resources, huge asset base, the most you could pay based on a basic daily care fee and that means tested fee in your first year would be about $42,000. Which I know sounds like a lot of money, but remember you'll be getting very high level 24-hour care in that facility. And then you would only pay that amount up until you hit that cap of that $61,000 in terms of the means tested fee. On the end there's other services. Some facilities will offer additional extra services for a range of things. That's again got to be all put in writing and you can agree or not agree. And the fees generally range there from sort of $10 to $120 a day for significant additional or extra services. Okay, so how do you pay for that accommodation payment? How does it happen? If you pay in a lump sum, it's called a refundable accommodation deposit, or acronym RAD for short. If you want to pay it on a daily basis, as in a daily fee, it's called a daily accommodation payment, or a DAP. You can pay it as a combination, and also, which with a number of clients, this strategy tends to work out, you can actually deduct your DAP from the RAD if you so think. So there's actually sort of multiple options. I've just listed the 3 standard options there. There are actually other options. There's options on options, unfortunately, in this space. Just to give you a sense that you've got, and you're not forced to make the decision on how you want to pay for that. Initially, you have up to 28 days to decide how you want to pay for your accommodation once you commit to the accommodation. And if you plan to pay it as a lump sum, as a RAD, you've got at least 6 months to arrange assets to pay if you have to sell a property, etc. Okay, so just a bit more detail on what a RAD is, the refundable accommodation deposit. It's basically buying you a right to live in that facility. You're buying a room for a period of time that you're there. When you come to leave, that RAD amount is fully refundable. So let's, for example, it's a $300,000 RAD, and you come to leave the facility, that is fully refundable to you. It's government guaranteed. That's assuming that the aged care facility is accredited, and that's a pretty easy thing to check, and you would only ever go with an accredited aged care facility. The RAD is also has advantages from a financial aspect in terms of exempt for age pension calculations. It's used to calculate the means tested fee, as I mentioned before in a previous slide, but it's exempt for age pension, so it can mean you can maintain high levels of age pension if that's what you need to do or want to do. And the other thing is, from an estate point of view, I don't know how to put this subtly, but your potential beneficiaries can't get access to that RAD. So that RAD's sitting there with the facility, government guaranteed, it's $300,000, for example. It can't be got at by beneficiaries, which appeals to some depending on their family situation. Now, one of the biggest things that we find that people need to get their head around when they're having a look at the assets they've got, and what they should do is, what do they do with their house? Well, they place of principal residence in most instances. Some people have investment properties, that's fine, but place of principal residence. So the rules around this are a little complicated, but I just wanted to give you a sense of how they work. So in terms of that aged care fee or means tested fee, your house is exempt if a spouse or a protected person lives there. Now, a protected person will be a dependent family member or a carer, and I won't go into that in too much detail. Otherwise, if they're not an exempt person living there, the value of that home will be capped at $157,000 for means tested fees. So in other words, you can own a $2 million property, only $157,000 of that value will count towards your means tested fee. So that's a really interesting. Now, who knows whether it stays in place in 5 years or 10 years' time, depending on what happens. Now, in terms of the age pension, the house is also exempt if a spouse lives there, or for the first 2 years if there's no spouse. And then it's exempt indefinitely if you pay part of your accommodation payment to the aged care facility as a daily payment. And also the rent you receive is exempt income. Now, can I just say on that one, those rules, I keep tinkering with these, those rules are changing come the end of this year, but I won't put on that too much, just to say that's the way it is now, but there is going to be a shift in that exemption at the end of the year. Okay, I've just got what looks at the surface a very simple case study here, which I just want to quickly go through just to give you a sense of how it all comes together. So here's Madge. She's got a $500,000 house. She's got $50,000 in cash, which means she's got $550,000 of assets, and the accommodation payment she's been asked to pay to go into this particular room in this particular facility is $300,000. Okay, so where advice is needed, and I'm going to show you on the next slide why, you've got to review the entire financial situation. You've got to work out how you're going to pay for the accommodation. Do we sell the home? Do we rent the home? There's products around called reverse mortgages, which you may or may not have heard of. They're used a little bit in the marketplace now. That may increase, especially in markets like Sydney with the very high property prices. But in the main, we don't see them used a lot at the moment, but they certainly are out there. The other thing is how you generate reliable cash flow to cover daily fees, and there's various product and income stream areas that we have to look at. So it's all about optimising your financial position, both from a cash flow point of view and in terms of your asset point of view. And down the bottom there, I've got that it's also, there's estate planning implications, as you'd appreciate, every step of the way. Okay, so again, just quickly to give you a sense of how the numbers work. You've got here, Madge sells the home, $500,000. She pays the full rate of $300,000. That's on the left, okay. And on the right, she keeps the home, rents the home. She gets net rent of $14,000, and she pays for her accommodation as a daily payment, as a DAP. So this is just how it pans out. So on the left, she's got some investment earnings on the $250,000, just over 3%. Age pension is $20,000 because she's getting a bit of means testing going on there. We'll look at that down the bottom. So total income of $28,000. Then her fees, the basic fee, as I said, of $17,000. The means tested fee in her situation would be just under $6,500. Total 23. Bottom line is she's got a net cash flow of $5,000. Plus she's got the RAD, which is worth $300,000, which is there for when she comes to leave the facility. So you go over to the right, she's keeping the home, she's renting the home, you just pan down to that. What you can see is that the key difference there is that she gets the full age pension because she's done that, kept the home and rented it out, so she's getting $22,000 as opposed to $20,000 in terms of age pension. Her means tested fee is only $501, again, because that's just the way that, that she's got exemptions there. So that's worked out quite well. But in terms of the costs, you can see she's got to pay that $19,000 DAP. And that interest rate, by the way, I should mention, that is called an NPIR. I won't bore you with that. That changes on a quarterly basis. So that was 6.36 when I did these sites. It's now 6.15, and it moves around based on reference to an interest rate scale from the government. So the bottom line is net cash flow $1,000, but she's also still got the home and the potential growth on the home. So when you look at that example, do you go, well, it's pretty obvious, cash flow is better on the left, so she should sell her home. but what if she wants to keep the home, the family wants to keep the home, she doesn't think that having higher cash flow is necessarily the most important thing. So this is why there's all sorts of options and multiple options in these types of situations. Okay, can I just flick on to, so these are all the permutations we see with clients in this situation. So starting on the top right there, you've got there's family considerations. There's the emotions of the home. Do we keep it? Don't we keep it? There's a potential value of the home and the growth in the home. There's the ability to generate income. Is that either from pension or other assets she may have? She may have a share portfolio. She may have an investment property, whatever it might be. In this situation, she obviously didn't, but this is a very simple example. If they do want to retain the home, a lot of people, how much is it going to cost you to make it rentable to maintain it and keep the home? Expected capital growth we've talked about, and obviously estate planning issues as far as assets within the family. Now, I'm just going to put this up. This is not to test your eyesight. This is just to give you an example of a case I did last month for a client. And what I want to draw your attention to here is, look, there were 5 options we generated in our advice document for this client. This was the most expensive accommodation price I've seen at $750,000. It's extraordinary, but it was very flash, the accommodation, and as it wanted to be. This then showed the variations of, a DAP, a RAD, a combination, and I won't bore you with all the details. But it just gives you the sense of detail that you have to go into, because this was a husband and wife involved. The husband was going to the facility, the wife wasn't, but obviously their assets were treated together in terms of assessment. So you've got to look at all that. And then we came up with some recommendations around this. Their key issue was they didn't want to trigger capital gains on their share portfolio if they didn't have to. So they wanted to look at all different ways of funding to make it work for them. So we helped them arrive at that decision. I just want to give you a snapshot of the level of detail that I think is required to make the right decisions, both in terms of a cash flow point of view and also in terms of your potential asset growth or movement in assets. Okay, so advice is the key. Well, I would say that. I'm an advisor, so I would say advice is the key. But if nothing else, I want to get across today that all these interacting issues that have to be addressed. So you've got to pay for something, you've got a lump sum payment or a daily payment or a combination. You sell, keep the home, rent the home. That's got personal, family preferences. You've got financial implications around that and cash flow. And then there's all sorts of product solutions out there. For some people, they want to get below certain threshold levels so that they can access more government subsidisation. They'll use funeral bonds, gifting rules, whatever else. But again, there's a lot of different strategies around that as well. And obviously, I'll keep stressing there's estate planning implications every step of the way. Okay, so the key that I've found in the clients that I've dealt with over a number of years is involve your family early. Just get everyone to understand priorities and preferences. Identify who's responsible for the financial decisions. Is it has someone been given the power of attorney or enduring power of attorney, or is mum or dad still completely capable of that? That's fine. Medical decisions, living arrangements, all those sorts of issues, which again sound very simple, but a lot of people don't plan enough in advance on this. Now, in terms of how we provide advice in this space, as Mark was saying, we're specialists in this area. We offer, based on our experience, people are looking for sort of one or two things. They're looking for just an overview about, look, I want to understand how this works. Give me the broader brush feel for it. So they want to know things about what are the advantages and disadvantages of a RAD or DAP. What are the ongoing costs of care? What are my Centrelink entitlements? What are the options for the family home? What are the means tested fees? They want to have an overview. So we find that this advice works best if we obviously do it on an hourly. Our fees are all hourly based, and we find we can give overview advice in about an hour or so for most people, which will give them some sense of some calculations and some general information about how they can move forward. Because you have some families that are very empowered to do this, and they just want someone that's an expert just to give them, yeah, you're on the right track, here's the direction you're going. The next one is more comprehensive advice. These are where people would really, similar to that example I gave of that case I did with the $750,000 accommodation cost. This is really, I want detailed advice. I want to know in absolute detail about how the government's going to help me subsidise the stuff. You know, what are my range of payment options? You know, what can I do? How do I do this? Give me cash flows. I want cash flows out 5 years, which is what we provide for people. There's various tax offsets, which again are not a lot of people would appreciate. The tax offsets are available with aged care costs, and again we model those because that means most people in this space, no matter what assets they've got, will within reason don't pay any tax. Projecting of future asset values is really important for beneficiaries usually, not necessarily for the person going into the care facility. And obviously we talk about the home as care. So again, we find these tend to take up to 5 to 7 hours, depending on the amount of time involved. A lot of this can be done over the phone. A lot of it is done in conjunction with other advisors, such as Mark, who may have a relationship with a client, or an accountant may have a relationship with a client. So we can reduce the amount of time involved, because I'm always very conscious of how we can turn around advice quickly, efficiently, and cost effectively. And that's what we're about. And then, in terms of contact details, I run the team at Morgan's, as Mark said, and we've got if you're interested in more information, there's an email address there. But sorry, I'll hand over to you now, Mark.
All right, thanks, David. Look, I guess, I mean, it's a very complex area and a very short time frame for David to run through, and appreciate his efforts on such a complex matter. Look, as you can see, there's much to consider, and there's no doubt that good advice will help, you know, map a path through somewhat of a maze, and a complicated maze. Look, David has experienced this area, and if you know anyone who you think could benefit from, you know, such aged care advice, just send your contact details or queries to age.care@vincents.com.au, and either David or myself will be in contact with you. Importantly for you or anyone you refer, any initial discussions will be held on an obligation-free basis. So Dave, that other website, was it myagecare.com.au?
myagecare.gov.au.
That'll also provide some details of the system. So as per usual, thank you again for your participation today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.